Welcome to the Hopefulist with me, Wendy McClure. This is where we turn those nasty, negative thoughts into positive and work toward a happy, fulfilled life. Now, let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Hopefulist. Joining me today, we have Niki Brosnan, who is the founder and CEO of Kids Anxiety Solution Works. Welcome, Niki.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, we're glad that you could join us and tell us a little bit about Kids Anxiety Solution Works.
Thank you. Yeah, it stemmed from my past, but with the pandemic and everything, I was a health and life coach. I still am. And I was helping a lot of moms, especially dealing with generational trauma, healing their past. But when the pandemic hit, I kept thinking, like, what's happening with our kids? You know, where are our kids in the mix of this, while adults are still trying to pivot and find their own footing? The kids kind of just fell away. And so with my work, I look a lot at ACEs, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's adverse childhood experiences. And what it does is it shows the link between what happens in childhood to different things that are happening as you're an adult. So adult depression, adult anxiety, but also things like heart disease, autoimmune disorders, stroke, diabetes, all those things. And so I thought, well, looking at where we're at in our world right now, how can we help our kids now so that they don't have to deal with these, diseases and autoimmune disorders and all of that in later life?
Now, are you talking about like a hereditary thing, or the anxiety is causing these medical issues?
The anxiety. So what it is it's certain things like if you have been abused as a child, if you dealt with parents in a divorce, if you had a parent that was incarcerated, if there was drugs, if there was any sort of pandemics or natural disasters, or anything, like any monumental thing that left a mark. Like what we like to say is that kids are resilient. Kids are, they're resilient, they bounce back. But what they're actually doing is they're learning how to survive, and they're learning the coping mechanisms in order to sort of blanket and hold in whatever things they have. And there's a book, The Body Keeps Score, right? So your body, you may think that they're fine, but the body has actually absorbed all that trauma, and it comes out later in life.
And it's kind of like repressing it for many years. Until
Yes.
you get to the point when you're an adult and you're like, wait a minute, I'm probably doing this because of, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. I don't have children. I don't really discuss children a whole lot here on the Hopefulist, just because it's not my area. But I know a lot of what you're saying is something that shaped us as adults. But let's talk a little bit about the pandemic and how you think that really has affected children through these last 2 just very tumultuous years.
Right. Well, from an adult point of view, I mean, we were all scrambling, trying to, like losing jobs or having to work from home. And then suddenly kids are also working from home. And kids, I mean, we have kids now that all they know is the pandemic, right? But there's also ones who kind of had their routine of parks, they had their routine of school. And then suddenly all of that was taken away. These massive milestones, things like graduation, birthday parties, sporting events that, that was their life. And suddenly that's gone. And suddenly they have to look at a computer screen and sit still and listen to their teacher, who's trying desperately to, educate children, 25, 30 of them through a computer screen. And so we're just seeing this rise of like kids, literally going into fight or flight because they don't know what's happening.
So what do you like? My niece actually she did graduate high school in May of 2020. So she missed her prom. They did eventually have a graduation, I think, that took place at a stadium where they live. She's in Texas, and it was virtual. But like, how do you think that that's going to affect her in the long term? I mean, like you were saying, these, milestones, like no prom, no traditional, graduation ceremony, and then no big party because, we were all kind of still on lockdown. Like, what kind of ramifications do you think something like that will have on these kids that have had to go through this?
Well, we're already seeing it. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but the suicide rates in kids have skyrocketed, especially in girls. the opioid crisis, drug use is up, substance abuse. We're seeing a lot more depression in children. We're seeing just like withdrawing from who they are and what they're used to. And so the long-term effect is that it's just going to, if it's not dealt with right now and acknowledged, what it becomes is adult depression, adult anxiety, adult issues, like beyond what it could be if we just sort of dealt with it now.
Now, do you think that more of the pandemic or kind of like social media?
Oh, that's a good question. It's, we live in a very strange time right now, and we're dealing with kids who are online, seeing things that are completely inappropriate for them, and dealing with subject matter that, again, is not, relevant, and not like their brains are physically and not developed to deal with the trauma that they're seeing on the nightly news, let alone TikTok and everything else. So that's a massive point, as well as the cyberbullying, which is huge, so, and as we know, as adults, it's a lot easier to be attacked from behind your computer than in real life, right? So,
and just as an aside, there's a ton of adult cyberbullying as well.
Yes.
So it's hard for us to handle, because I know I still, and I don't fall into the trap as much as I used to, but I'd get into these group conversations with these strangers and I would be outraged. It's like I'd fire off a response and then I put the phone down and I keep picking it up and checking it to see if they responded back. And I'm an adult, you know what I mean? I can't imagine how these kids are handling these types of situations, because, I'm not sure of your age, but I didn't grow up with any type of social media or even email or anything like that. I mean, it's just such a different world, and there's so much for them to have on their shoulders now. So do you have any advice on, I don't know, besides like, limiting social media, that's obviously the best answer, but not always realistic.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and you hit on it. Like, I was an 80s baby as well. So, we were just told that, here's the door. Totally. Here's
Get outside,
the door.
don't come back until dark.
Right. When the street lights come on, you can come home. So, and that was life. I mean, and I'm a parent now of an 11-year-old, 6-year-old. And let me tell you, those kids stay close to me. And it's, I'm not a helicopter parent, but you just can't open the door anymore and say, see ya.
It is a different world.
It is. And sadly, I mean, if I could take them back to the 80s and just like show them, like, here's a stick, go play for the day kind of thing, so, yeah. But
remember when you would find that like stick that had like a fork in it and it was like a crutch? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And you're like, this is the coolest stick ever. I've got crutches. I mean, could you imagine a kid finding a stick now and being enamored with it?
No, not unless it was in the middle of a Minecraft field or something like that, in the middle of a video game. So that's about it.
Yeah. Like, so what is some of the things we can do to bring maybe a little of our own type of childhood to the children that are in our lives now, be it they are our own children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews?
Mm-hmm. My main suggestion is a big dose of vitamin N. Get out in nature, as much as you can. Get them off their screens and get them out. Get them to the forest, get them to the creek, get them to the ocean as much as you can. Now, I mean, it is a different time, so that means there's a lot more responsibility on the parents to make that happen, right? Like, it's not just, I mean, we had like crown land for, acres and acres where we just ran, and that's not possible anymore. But as parents and as, teachers and caregivers, we need to create the space where the kids are back outside, connecting with nature, climbing trees, doing all those things. So that's number one. And you mentioned about what we can do around screens, because it is, I mean, it's a necessary evil in this day and age, and we're still navigating it. Like, I hear you about like, how do we deal with our emotions around trolls? And so we're learning as we go as well. But the main thing is just educating our kids. So educating them on, if you see something that feels inappropriate, please let me know, and again, it comes back to building the trust with your child. And so that they know that coming to you is a safe place, so that they know that if they see something that feels weird or looks weird, because I mean, even kids like playing video games that are playing with other people and, kids, the people who are posing as kids, I mean, it's a minefield. But so you just need to have the conversation and be aware of what your child's doing online. And if you can, just like keeping them away from social media as long as possible.
It's so hard because it's like all of their peers are on it. It's like I remember my sister trying to keep a cell phone away from her daughter for as long as possible. But then she's like, I feel like she's not safe. I feel like she can't get a hold of me when she might need to. So it's like you had said, a necessary evil. And here's kind of a tough question. And, I think that maybe a lot of people will get mad uh, with me putting this out there. But how much are we, the parents, the adults, to blame for this immersion in social media? Because again, when we were kids, we had a television, we might have had a couple of channels, but now these kids are getting, I remember when one of my nieces was born, she wasn't even a year old yet. And they had put like propped up an iPad in the back of the seat so that she could be watching and listening to something at all times. And it's just constant stimulation from the time they're born. So how much of this is on our heads?
Oh, it's definitely, it's all on us, really. I mean, and it's especially again in the pandemic, right? You're working from home, you need some quiet. What do? And it's a fantastic tool. It's an educational device. There are a lot of positives around it, but it does become a crutch. Again, when we were traveling as kids, what did we get in the backseat of the car? I struggle to think of anything, beyond a book, maybe. But, it was like, we're going on a 12-hour road trip, sit down on the back, vinyl seat. And
right. We had like 3 or 4 books lined up. Because you're right.
Yeah.
And that's how we traveled as children. We were in the car. And I don't know what it sounds like. You were similar to me with your, 10, 12-hour car. Every year we went to visit relatives that was 8 to 10 hours away. And there was 3 kids in the back seat with a book.
Yes.
That's all we had. But yeah, the stimulation. And, I kind of can't blame parents because like you said, they need that time to get done what they need to get done. And it's an easy way to distract them. But at the same time, when you go back at them and you're like, look, we're going to go out to the beach or we're going to go climb trees. And they're like, well, I don't want to do that. I want to play this game because that's what I'm used to doing. That's what you told me to do.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And they need a detox. They really do, same as we do, so I homeschool my kids. And so I make a point of, anything that needs to be done before 8, I get it done. I get up early and do whatever I need on the screens. And then it's homeschool time. And then there's no screens. There's no screen for me. There's no screen for them, so that I'm modeling for them that I'm not on my phone while they're doing their work, that we're all doing things together. And for us on road trips too, I mean, we travel so much as our family, and it's easy to throw a movie on in the back seat. The kids are quiet, it's peaceful, I can enjoy the ride, but I don't want them watching a screen for 12 hours. So that again falls back on me. So maybe I'm doing a read aloud, maybe I'm orchestrating a game or doing something, or playing I Spy, whatever it is.
99 bottles of beer on the wall, maybe.
Right. Little sing along for sure. So it's all these things, but it's just, the easy thing is the screen, and we're all programmed that way. So the part of it is we need to move away from that and get our kids to look up and look at the world around them rather than just looking what's in the palm of their hand.
I think that, and it's such a deep rooted issue. I actually just myself, I did a live this morning on Facebook, and I found this new filter I had never used before. And the whole first 2 minutes of me is, look how fabulous I look. Oh my gosh, I look so good. And it had like little eyeliner on me and these big long lashes. And I'm like, and the problem with this is when I went to actually upload a normal video of me, I'm like, you look horrendous. You're disgusting. Yeah. I don't want anybody to see me like this. So we have so much more of this bombarding us and our children. I mean, we always had that as well in the form of magazines and movie stars and all of that kind of stuff. But it's so much worse now because we have these filters, and it's the kids that we're going to school with and not just movie stars and models and all of this kind of stuff. So I have to imagine this is so draining and puts so much pressure, especially on girls from such a young age. Do you have any advice on how to combat some of that? And I'm sorry if I'm asking too hard of questions for you.
No, these are all great. I mean, again, it comes back to like, I'm a big proponent of, you have to have good communication with your kids. Anxiety stems from kids feeling like they're not good enough. So you're absolutely right. Like filters, our girls are seeing these filters of what they quote unquote should look like. I mean, they're so dangerous because they like, when I've seen a few of them and it's like, oh my gosh, like it's just so unrealistic. And so, but it plants the seed, just like you said, when we look at magazines and think, oh, that's what we should look like. And so, like I said, the girls suicide rate has skyrocketed. And I'll send you the quote so you can put it in your show notes later, because I remember I read it and I had to read it again because I thought, no way, but it's gone up so much. But it makes sense. I mean, our expectations of girls have always been ridiculous, and now again with the filters, we're seeing this like, it's just being pounded into them again of what you should look like, and what you do look like isn't good enough, so put a filter on, right? And like, I have to be aware too, because I think like, I don't feel like right, well, put a filter on, there you go, like that's better. That's not me, that's not who I am. But you need to open up the conversation, and you need to like talk about like the real world versus screen world, or the metaverse, or however you want to say it. But it's again, it's new terrain for all of us, and we're learning as we go. But to turn a blind eye and just let kids navigate it on their own is really unfair. So we need to be involved. We need to know what they have on their phones, what they're able to look at, and how it's affecting them, and just have that conversation.
So it's about, like you had said, the open communication, like comparatively, when we were growing up, it's the same kind of conversation where, your mom would say, okay, the women in those magazines, and first of all, they weren't real, because they were airbrushed and, all of that kind of stuff. It's the same thing with this. And it's just so much easier for everyone to do it now with just the click of a filter. And I got to tell you, I'm still in awe over how awesome I looked earlier today on that live. I mean, I had it going on. But can we talk about adults for just a second?
Of course.
I think that anxiety, and, it was so interesting to hear you talk about it in the beginning about how this ACEs, which I had never heard of before, but as soon as you said adverse childhood experiences, I was like, oh, hello, that is
right.
me. I have had an issue with anxiety my entire life. Just that feeling of being insecure, of, like you said, never being good enough. And, even just when I am with people, I'm pretty much an outgoing person. I'm sure that does not come across as at all. I'm kidding. Very loud and boisterous and all of that kind of stuff. But, I would go out and have a great time because I have social anxiety. And I remember people be like, you're fine in social situations. No, it's not the actual situation. It's when I get home later and I'm like, oh my gosh, I said this to that person. And do you think they're upset? And oh my gosh, I took over the whole thing and I made it all about me. And it's just insane. I mean, I literally had insomnia for decades because I would wake up in the middle of the night and I just couldn't shut my mind off. And again, the social media is making that so much worse on all of us. So, what are a couple of tips that you think that you may be able to give to kind of, reel that in just a little bit?
Right. So that's trauma. What you're talking about there, that's a source of trauma that you experience. And, for me, like growing up again, 80s babies, there wasn't anxiety. No one had anxiety back then. I was a perfectionist. I was just nervous. I just, even though I would throw up before tests and everything, it's just like, oh, she's just nervous. I was so dissociated because of the way, like grew up in a very abusive environment. And so I dissociated from everything. So I was called the ice queen, and same thing. I love being out. I love being social. And I would come home and do the same thing, analyze everything I said, like basically collapse from exhaustion because I was trying so hard while I was out with the people pleasing and all of that. Right. And then you come home and you're right.
Yes. It's like being an actor and you're like, okay, well, I'm here. The show started and, I have to stay on until the night is over. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so adults, if you are sort of new on your healing path, or you're just, coming into the fact of like, oh, wait a second, maybe that isn't normal. Just really simply like observing yourself. Like, where are your thoughts? Are you thinking about what happened yesterday or 10 years ago? Or are you thinking about worrying about what's happening tomorrow? Or are you present? So what we need to do is we need to bring ourselves back into the present. So we can do that in a number of ways, like just really simply just through breathing and just breath work. Like when I started my journey, I realized I held my breath all the time, to the point that when I went to an acupuncturist, she said, I just feel like I need to tell you to breathe. And I was like, that's weird. And so she got me to actually write cards all around my house saying, breathe, breathe,
Wow.
breathe, because I would hold everything in so tightly. And it sounds ridiculous. And it's still, to me, it's like, wow.
It doesn't though, because I don't think I have the problem with the breathing so much, but I hold everything in my shoulders. My shoulders are constantly hunched up to the point that I've got pain in my neck and in my back and in my shoulders because I'm just constantly hunched up. And that's got to be stress. That's got to be worry and anxiety and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And we all have so far to come. But you're right. We didn't talk about anxiety when we were children. It was something that was not really ever discussed. And we all had so much of it. So what is your advice then to maybe adults to start on a journey of their own of self-discovery and digging into some of the trauma that they've had in the past that is creating the pattern of the life that they have now?
That's a really good question. So to begin with, just to touch on what you said, again, like with the notes, I would write a note and stick it to your computer and just say, take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, relax your jaw, because those are like sort of the three main touch points, right? And so that you're reminding yourself that throughout the day, you're like, oh, right, I'm sitting with my shoulders at my ears. Let's just relax that down. Another really powerful exercise to do if you're just trying to figure out what's going on. And if you are like me, or like in a place of where you just feel like you just don't know what's going on, is something called morning pages. And so the first thing you do in the morning,
I just started doing these.
Did you really?
Yes.
So powerful.
Oh my gosh.
So powerful.
I can't bring myself to do 3. You're supposed to do 3 of them. And I started it at 2, but I reasoned it like this. And morning pages is when you write 3 pages of free journaling. You write whatever comes to your mind. And I believe I actually discussed this in a recent podcast. And the point of it is to kind of get all of the things in your subconscious out onto the paper so that you can release it and not have it bog you down. But I kind of rationalized in my head. I'm like, well, I write small and it's college ruled or whatever. And I'm slowly shrinking, now this morning was like a page. So I've got to get back to it. And I'm sorry I interrupted. I was just so excited.
No, it's okay.
Please continue.
Yeah, you're right though. But so that's really interesting. You said you started off doing 3 pages and now you're down to 1. So you're getting close, right? So somewhere your subconscious doesn't want to be discovered, like whatever is there for you. So even like I had days when I would write, I don't want to do this. This is stupid. I have nothing to say, but you literally keep writing
for 3 pages.
3 pages, like every morning is the first thing you do. You don't type it. You don't do it on your phone. You get a pen in hand and you write it.
Are you getting writer's cramp like I am?
Oh yeah. Yeah. My hand's used to it, but like this was early on. So where my healing journey began is a friend of mine gave me Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, which is where Morning Pages is from.
Yes. And I'm in the process of reading that.
It's so good. It's so good. And for me, it was the first time that I was forced to decide what I want to do, because you have these artist dates you have to take yourself on. And it's really beautiful. Like I highly recommend the book. It's just so good. And just like being like, well, again, I don't want to. Well, what will I do? I don't know. But you make yourself do these things, and you have these little dates with yourself where, you might go to like a secondhand shop or an antique shop, or go buy yourself flowers, or like these little nurturing things that for me was like this, like, oh, I do have an opinion. I do know what I'd like. And so, and you kept writing, and I kept writing. Like, I don't even know how many journals I have full now, but it's so important. And you never read it. You just write it, and then you like bury it. So
how long have you been doing these?
Oh my gosh. Well, I started like 20 years ago.
Wow.
20 years ago. I haven't done it consistently every day. I've taken time off and that kind of thing. But whenever I get to a place of I'm not sure, or I'm just like, I don't feel grounded, I go back to the morning pages. It's like my number one go-to.
Okay, and I wanted to mention one other thing, and this is why I'm really slacking off, and what I'm doing is wrong with only doing a page. Is they say that you really need to, and I think this is what you were leading up to earlier. You really need to get into a specific and certain zone in order to get what's in the subconscious out onto the page. So I've also heard people say that you need to free write in your journal for 20 to 30 minutes before that stuff even starts to come out. So that's why the number of the pages is important. And I really need to do the 3 pages. But I got to tell you, I've only been doing it for a couple of weeks, and the writer's cramp, it's the struggle is real right now. The struggle is real. But yeah, I have to do it. I have to commit to it. The problem with these types of things is people just don't want to take the time.
Absolutely. And, the thing I find, and I always say this, I said it when I was like, so the right morning pages was my number one thing I got all my clients to do, when I was working with women, because we bury the trauma, we bury it, and we don't even know it's there. So
we don't want to discover it. I think that's the biggest issue too, because it's going to hurt.
Absolutely.
And we try to avoid pain at all costs.
Absolutely. So that's a big one. And, so like going back to the importance of it is it's dealing with the subconscious and trying to get to that, like uncovering it. Right. And so even when I work with kids now, it's coming back to like teaching them to write out their feelings, teaching them, like, even if it's a few words, like I am mad, just getting them to express themselves and get it out of their body. So when you're writing it, you're getting it out of your body.
Right. So what is something that, and this is something that I struggle with trying to help others as well, is, I can't even seem to get people to do 3 things in a gratitude journal. How do you get your clients to do 3 pages of morning pages?
Well, it's crazy. So, I always say the science is complicated, like trying to understand the brain science, trying to understand trauma that we hold in our body, because we're all different. So it's very hard, but the solutions are simple. But you're right, the trick is doing it. So one of my number one tricks to do is habit stacking. So habit stacking is taking something you're already doing, like say, for your morning pages. In the morning, you go to make your coffee. When you go to make your coffee, that's a signal that it's time to do morning pages. So you're taking something that you already do automatically and you do it. So one thing I do with my kids, like my kids that I work with, as well as my own kids, is when we brush our teeth and when my clients' children brush their teeth, they say their affirmations. So I am brave, I am strong, I am powerful. So when they start brushing their teeth, it signals that new habit needs to happen as well, because we have these things and we need to create habits, because it's like same as New Year's resolutions. Everyone's great at setting, 20 New Year's resolutions. Ask them how they're doing January 15th. And most of them have fallen away because they're just expecting that they're going to do it. But if you don't prepare, if you don't set something in place that's going to help you, it's never going to get done.
It's not motivation, it's discipline.
Yes. It's discipline and it's habit. So you need to create a new habit. So you need to change the old record, right? So where normally you would just, come home from work and fall on the couch and turn on Netflix. If your goal is to go to the gym, you need to have your shoes out, your gym pass ready, and your clothes on the bed. And so you just go, right? It's not something you even think about.
Yeah. Like I said, the biggest dilemma I have faced is convincing people that this work is worth it. And it is. It's a big change that we're all used to, like you just said, coming home from work, collapsing on the couch, having some takeout and putting on Netflix or what have you. But when we really take the time for ourselves and to discover what's going on in our subconscious mind, it's kind of enamoring, really, because there's so much going on and there's so much driving the behavior that you have that you're not even aware of. It's fascinating.
It is. Yeah. And like the brain science, like I love it, because it's, especially coming from a background of trauma, it's like, well, why? For me, like when I was growing up, I kind of coming into this realization of, because I dissociated so badly, I have these big gaps in my memory of what happened. And I would look at people who were like, you're not going to keep me down. And I'm going to be this person because I want to do it. And you're not going to tell me no. And I would look at that personality versus my personality, which was like, oh, you kicked me to the ground. Okay, well, I guess this is where I should stay, so but that's the dynamic, right? And there's a really good book called The Orchid and the Dandelion. And I'll send you the name of the author too. I forget what it is, but it's fascinating because they said there's two types of children. There's the dandelion that's just resilient, right? Will grow anywhere, will flourish anywhere. It doesn't matter. And then there's the orchid. And it doesn't matter, like whatever environment they're in, they need that extra care. So if they're in an abusive environment, they're not going to be able to shine. Whereas a dandelion is going to be like, well, whatever, I'm still going to grow. And so we need to keep that in mind as well when we're looking at our own past trauma and our own history. And you're right. I mean, I could have very easily just stayed in my place of denial about anything that happens. Would have been a much easier path, but it comes up to bite you. And so you have a choice. Do you want to repeat the generational trauma, or do you want to be the change? So, and you're right. You have to have that intrinsic motivation. You can't always be just going, well, I guess, it's too hard to do the morning pages. I'm not going to bother. You have to want it.
Right. And that's what I can't seem to get across to people is it's easier to not delve into this stuff. It's easier to coast in life. But you're not happy.
No.
Because you can't be until you address this stuff. You can't figure out what is going to make you happy until you figure out how to stop doing the things that are making you unhappy.
Exactly. And you're existing, right? But you're relying on crutches to do that, right? So there's that denial piece. And there's just this, defense mechanism that our brain puts in place to protect us from the trauma that we don't want to deal with. Exactly. Right. So we have alcohol, we have, binge eating, we have drugs,
social media.
Social media. Yes. Like all these things to numb off and not look at, the things that you need to look at. And I still have to check myself and be like, okay, so I've been on TikTok for an hour. Why? I don't need that, but we need to constantly be checking in. And again, it's not easy work. It's not easy work. And it's a journey for me still, but I look at who I was and I'm so grateful that I, took this path and that now I can look at, families and help families and be like, this is what we can do for your kids now. So that when they're 40, they're not trying to deal with the trauma that happened to them when they were 5.
Yeah. So they don't have to wait until their 40s to start getting their life together and living their best life, that they can do it, from the time that they're growing up through their 20s, 30s, 40s. And there's not this, I think we all seem to have this awakening a little bit later in our lives where, hopefully someday we can get to the point where, maybe people can enjoy their lives throughout their lives.
Yeah, totally. Well, we see it all the time, right? The valedictorian who looks like they have it all, who self-sabotages and, gets divorced, ends up, bankrupt, all these things. And if you look at the links, it links back to childhood. So it's really, really interesting and going, wow, so if we can give kids tools, and for me right now, the biggest issue is dealing with the stigma around anxiety and people being like, well, my child doesn't have anxiety, they're fine. And I keep saying, well, if maybe that's the case, maybe your child has no anxiety, maybe they are just completely just bobbing along and super happy. But what if you just gave them the tools anyways? What if you taught them the breath work? What if you taught them how to meditate? What if you taught them that exercising was a great way to release stress? The only thing that's going to happen is that later on in life, which we can all agree, we have anxiety at some point in our lives, they have the tools to draw upon. So I just think it's a win-win.
So what are the top tools then you have for helping your children deal with their own anxiety? Or really even adults.
Yeah, adults as well. So first and foremost, talking, making sure that the communication's open, that they know that you're a safe place, or even as an adult, if you have someone that you trust, and that's the big part as an adult, have someone you trust, because information is power. So you want to make sure that you find someone that, won't turn the information against you if you open up to them. So whether that's in the form of a counselor, a therapist, or a trusted friend. Also, it's really important breath work. Again, it's so simple, right? We do it without even thinking about it, but it's the quality of our breath. So just taking the time to just do some deep breaths before you go to sleep, before you wake up, or after you, just right when you wake up, maybe not that, but, and then also just especially with kids, making sure they know that they are loved, because the underlying factor with anxiety for all of us is just that feeling of unworthiness, that feeling that we're not good enough in whatever area it is. So nurturing that as an adult, giving yourself the self-care, giving yourself the love, going to buy yourself the flowers, going for a massage, taking the time to do the morning pages. These are all ways that you can nurture yourself. And then, I'm a big fan of meditation. For me, yoga transformed my life. And it wasn't, I was a varsity athlete. The last thing I wanted to do was sit and, just focus on my breath. Like my best friend and I went to yoga for the first time. We were looking and competing with each other back and forth to see who could do whatever. But it became this movement where I had to stay present, which again, coming back to what we talked at the beginning, like getting your mind in the present, what's happening now, not thinking about yesterday, not thinking about tomorrow, but just being present to the right now. Because right now we're all okay, right? And just remaining in that place of calm and getting out in nature. Those are my, top really easy ones that everyone has accessible.
Well, and I think it might be worthy to bring up now that they say that when you're thinking about the past, that's depression. When you're thinking about the future, that's anxiety. So as you just said, try to stay in the present. I mean, of course, we're going to think about the past and the future, but don't live in those areas. Live in the present, that is. And my biggest takeaway from this whole conversation is that I can tell my husband that I need to go buy myself flowers and get massages in order to be my best self, right?
There you go. Absolutely. It's been, that's the prescription right there.
I love it. Okay. So tell us what's coming up for you. What are you doing? What are you offering? How can people get a hold of you?
Oh, fantastic. So right now I'm doing one-on-one coaching, and I have a couple workshops that are coming out probably March or April. And I have a course coming out for parents and caregivers, as well as teachers, coming out in the fall. So that will be about an 8-week course where I'll walk you through just different things you can do, understanding the brain, how it works, and easy to use and accessible ways that you can help your children.
And where can we find you?
You can find me everywhere at Kids Anxiety Solutions. So on Pinterest, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, just one word, Kids Anxiety Solutions.
I can't understand why that you're going into social media overload. No, I'm the same way. I'm the same way. I'm on all that stuff too.
Complete overwhelm as well, I should mention.
And that's one of the problems with doing business like we do, is it's kind of what a necessary evil. I mean, that's how we kind of advertise our business and, get people to know about what's happening. So, we have to be on there. So one of the things that I try to do, and I've been completely unsuccessful thus far, is to only go on when I have something to post.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I know. And then not buying. Totally. And it's constantly, and then post and then let it go, right? Not posting and being like, oh, I need to check it. How many likes do I have? Do I have any comments I need to respond to, and just find that time. So for me, that's putting my phone in my bedroom, walking away, closing the door and going downstairs and forgetting about it for a while.
Boy, we really need to, police ourselves, right?
Yes.
It's kind of crazy. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been so enlightening. What a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for coming on to the show today and giving out such this awesome information.
Oh, it was so great to meet you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for joining me on the Hopefulist. Now, go on out there and be badass. I'm always here cheering you on.